Well, good morning and welcome to Zen Live and ideas that can change your life. At least they change mine. So, last night I saw the end of the Ken Burns documentary on Vietnam. And I missed the I thought I was recording it, but then I realized that it wasn't recording, so I rushed to channel 23 to turn it on. So I missed the first part where Nixon left, which was okay. But I did watch the collapse of South Vietnam and the desertion and America's exit and desertion of the people that had really committed their life to and believed in, like a child believes in Santa Claus, and then the Americans left and the communists came in and the rice paddy closed up. So, and then of course there was the wall. The wound. And so the title I wrote up here was The Wound in the Side of Jesus. You know, the part of the Christian mythology, and by mythology I don't mean fantasy, but I mean the story, is that Christ had a wound in his side. And you see, and this is great. In the Middle Ages, there are a lot of paintings, you know, of the lance cutting the wound in the side of Christ. And then it's held up there like an open vagina in the paintings, you know, the wound of Christ with the blood dripping out of it, you know. And this is the wound that won't heal in mythology. It's the wound that won't heal in the Arthurian tales, where the Fisher King had a lance wound in his side and it would not heal. And so Vietnam was a wound that will not heal. So this whole idea of the wound that won't heal is Buddha said, is the suffering of life. Life is suffering, he said. And what he was talking about was this wound that no matter what we do won't heal. The wound that won't heal. And we all feel that. Eckhart Tolle calls it the pain body. The pain body. This, it's like a jaws that rises up to feed. And then when satisfied, it goes back down. This pain that rises up. Why, it's everywhere. It's on Facebook. You have an opinion clash and the pain rises up. You idiot. And it ends up by people calling everybody and then fine, I'm going to defriend you. Excommunicate you. Disappear you. I disappeared you. Kind of funny. So, but this, I can't take it anymore feeling, you know, this outrage and we're encouraged to be outraged. Well, aren't you outraged? Where's the rage? Where's the outrage? I want to see it. Stick a mic. Aren't you outraged? The reporters, are you mad? Are you raged? Prodding. We've got to get this rage out, the steam, the pressure cooker is going, you see, and it just pops out in violence. So Vietnam was that's what I loved about the Burns documentary, is that it was both a narrow focus, a very detailed narrow focus lens, and a wide angle lens at the same time. Wide angle lens takes in the whole history. But then in order to, you fill in the pieces with the stories. And so his documentary was a beautiful weaving of the objective facts and the subjective feelings of both the Vietnamese, the warriors, on the Americans and the Vietnamese, Viet Cong and North Vietnamese soldiers, and their stories. They're subjective. So this was a beautiful tapestry of subjective heart and objective facts, you see. And most of the time we just get one or the other. Or you get Apocalypse Now, which is a metaphorical piece of art that is entirely different from the Ken Burns subjective-objective tapestry, you see. You know, a lot of time I was watching this documentary on the Tsars of Russia, and there was a battle scene there, but it was in one of the palaces, but it was a mural that was like the whole room, you know, and it captured the whole battlefield, the battle of with Napoleon and his armies, you know, this wide panorama. So Ken Burns was this electronic video wide panorama, and it all ended in a wound, and it all ended in this healing. And I remember that when I first began to watch the Ken Burns documentary, I was at the same time, right before the first one started, I was watching Globe Trekker, and it was on the tough trains of Vietnam, and he was taking a train trip down the railroad of Vietnam, going through all the war zones from Ho Chi Minh City down to Saigon, or from the whole, and this railroad, you know, which was is the only thing that ties the country together. Went through all of the bombed out craters and the planes that are left and the damage, you know, and the people are all very happy. I mean, the forgiving. Americans go there and there's a great forgiveness and joy. And this is strange. So I've got this feeling, you know, of this. Vietnam was this, before the French came in, was this rice paddy land of this ancient Asian land, you know, where a rural economy that lived in the rhythms of the seasons, you know, and then these cultural implants, or these cultural, the French civilization, the French culture, French civilization was Western civilization, and it went in there and planted rubber trees and exploited the country. And then it was kind of like a rice paddy field, and then they clear a little space in the algae, you know, and plant the French culture, and the algae tries to come back, but they fight it off. But finally, at Dien Bien Phu, the French lost, and the algae comes back, and then it's all Vietnam, and then it's divided again. It's because of the American influence. They divided it again. And then American culture created South Vietnam. And the algae tried to come back and restore the rice paddies. And then America kept putting in more and more weapons and force to keep that space open where American culture thrived. And you had the stores and your consumerism, and you had the corruption, and you had the prostitution, and all of this stuff came with the American culture. And it's a wild and crazy place. And the rice paddy fields just kept trying to come back. And so for 1955, most of my young adult life was, America was supporting the French in Indochina. And then the Americans went in, and then the war began to grow, and then it reached the apex in 1968, and then they began to get out, and then it ended in 75. So 1955 to 75, in my memory, you have this American force trying to keep the rice paddy from closing back over. Finally, they gave up. And the rice paddy came pouring in and began to erase the effect of the war. And now you go back to Vietnam, and relations are stored, and Americans are hugged. And what was it all about? Was that a dream? What was it, you see? And so now we have the wound. And then the Burns tells the story of how they how they won this particular design, and how it was, a lot of people didn't like it because it wasn't a positive. It just looked like an open gash, an open wound. It wasn't a positive statue of heroic soldiers. Now some people wanted the statue, Marines raising the flag on Iwo Jima, yes, that's what we wanted. But this was an open gash, a wound. Now, I haven't been there. I guess I should. I don't go to D.C. that very often. I should go. But the experience of the people there, and the experience that Burns talked about, of the veterans having post-traumatic syndrome now. Every war calls it a different name. Shell shock, whatever. But the veterans who came back there, and the ones that were telling the story, they just broke down and cried and cried and cried and cried. And the wound, you see, is opened. So you can go there and feel the deaths. 50,000 men were sacrificed. 50,000 young Americans were poured into this inferno, like lemons going to the sea, just poured into it, as if it was insatiable. It was like the First World War. This crevasse opens up, and you just pour human life into it. It's unending. World War II, just pour life into it. And it builds and it builds. It has its own life. It has its own force, and it asks for more death. More death, you see. In Vietnam, more death. Send more to die. And the more we sent to die, the more the Vietnamese sent to die. So it was a river of life pouring into this cauldron. A river of life, you see. And nobody could stop it. And everybody said, we're winning, we're winning. And you go there, we're losing, we're losing. No, we're winning, no, we're losing. And it was a conflict between culture versus heart. And this, so I've been talking about culture a lot, and we usually, it takes re-explaining, because we think of culture as art, music. Oh, it's good stuff, you see. But what I'm talking about here is the culture as a organism. Culture is a psychic organism, like an institution. If you ever worked in an institution, you know that the institution kind of like has a psychic order to it that wants to maintain itself. So if you go to work in an institution, you have to fit into the laws of the institution, which are designed to protect the institution. The institution survives as an organism with defense mechanisms and a drive to replicate itself. It doesn't create itself, it replicates itself in time. So an institution is kind of a shell that has a memory, and its purpose is to maintain itself. So the institution may have different functions. I worked in institutions to rehabilitate the retarded who had in the 70s. The institutions were the retarded, and I know I'm using the word retarded, but that was the word we used then. So anyway, the retarded were put in wards and housed, and the court said you got to let them out. You got to give them a chance for independent living skills. You got to free the retarded. And so there were a lot of institutions created to teach independent living skills to the retarded. And that's what I was doing. But in these big institutions I worked at, I began to realize that they really didn't want, the institution uses its clients as its food. In other words, an institution needs clients or people to help or whatever, but once they go into the institution, they stay in the institution. Because the institution does not want to the institution does not want to, how am I trying to say this? The institution does not want to free everybody, because then the institution would have nobody in it, you see. So there is a double bind in the institution, that it really doesn't want to liberate all of the people in its charge, because then it would have no reason to be. So it's going to perpetuate itself by making the people dependent upon the institution. The medical institution does that. Religion as an institution does that. It doesn't take you to the other shore and let you go and say you don't need religion anymore. No, religion says, the church says, no, you got to stay in the church. And the hospital institution says, no, you got to be dependent upon the doctor and the drugs. And so the institutions to liberate the retarded, you see, basically created a system which made the retarded dependent upon the institution. So it was this kind of double bind I'm speaking about as culture. Culture as a living mind institution that describes reality. So Vietnam split the culture between those who were for the culture, and the culture said, go to war, it's your duty, patriotic duty, go there and be sacrificed for the God of freedom. The God of freedom wants sacrifice, so you got to go there and die for the God of freedom, and to prevent the evil communists from taking over the world, to prevent the devil from taking over the world. So it became kind of like a cosmic war, you see. And culture, American culture, was the God of light, was the light side, and communism was the dark side. But then when the soldiers went there, the heart responded, wait a minute, I'm burning little grass huts and I'm shooting the people I'm supposed to save. I'm killing the people I'm supposed to save. So that was a heartfelt compassion. And it was in contradiction to what the culture was saying. They're gooks, shoot them. The only way to win is to kill more gooks, you see. So this split is the wound in the side of Jesus. I mean, the whole crucifixion of Jesus saying, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. Forgive culture, because it doesn't know what it's doing. Culture is unconscious. The heart is conscious. Culture captures the mind and makes it an automaton. We just believe culture. We believe the assumptions that it is based on. And this is present in, I don't know much, I don't go out in the world now, but I'm on Facebook and I can see all of this on Facebook where people have their cultural positions. Well, that's my position and I'll never agree with you. Well, you have the right to your opinion, but I'll never agree. My position is supporting culture. And the Republican Party then became the party of the American culture. Flag, God, patriotism, sacrifice, duty, go to war. How dare you question culture? If in a religious context, how dare you question the church? Get out. Trump. How dare you question Trump? Get out, you son of a bitch. How dare you question America? I am America. How dare you question me? You see. So anytime any culture identifies, as a nationalism, nationalism is a misplaced God. It turns culture into God. And this is why Christianity has destroyed itself. Christianity, particularly in America, has identified with culture. So now God and politics is one. And now salvation is not getting out of culture, which is what the salvation of Jesus was talking about, transcending culture. No. Salvation now is in culture, in time, when the next president is elected, when the Republicans get all the power. That's the promised land. That's the kingdom of God. The kingdom of culture and the kingdom of God are all mixed up, you see. And that requires sacrifice. What do you have to sacrifice? You have to sacrifice your heart. You have to sacrifice your conscience. You have to sacrifice your ability to tell the truth, to tell the difference between the unreal and the real. Only culture can tell you what's real. You're fake. You see how the wound is continuing? Do you see how the wound gets kicked down the road? And the wound, you see, in culture is the wound in us, because we are culture. We can't, everything you know, I think my little time is up, but everything you know is what's given by culture. You go to school, your education, the history of mankind, everything is maintained in the memory of culture. So the wound, and I'll probably get into this. There's more to this that I didn't get to say. So anyway, I'll draw this up right now, and we'll talk about this if I can remember. But the wound in the side of Jesus is the wound in the side of America, and this memorial, Vietnam, is a living, open wound where healing occurs. When you touch the wound with your hands, when you can actually touch the wound, and you feel the compassion. So the wound is really a healing wound because it closes with gentle fingers the wound in the mind, the wound that is the separation of the mind and the heart. You see, mind is captured by culture, and the heart is what feels. So when the wound is healed, when the mind and the heart become one. But you have to go into the wound in order to do that. So anyway, thank you for dropping in.